Hello, listeners. Welcome to Geopolitical Cousins. This is our postmortem of the Trade Value Leaders column, piece, whatever you want to call it. Marco and I said we were going to do an hour and a half, and we ended up doing 2+ hours. So enjoy yourself. We saved the conversation for why Trump is not on either of our lists towards the end. I'm sure that will cause lots of controversy, but whatever. We love your hate mail, and we love to hear from you. Jacob at jacobshapiro.com, Marco at geopoliticalalpha.com. You can send us feedback there. Otherwise, we're having fun. We hope you're having fun. We're hoping that if you like this podcast, you will share it with your friends and your cousins and your neighbors and everybody else, and leave reviews on the podcast, if you will. That is also super helpful. So take care of the people that you love. We'll see you out there. Take us away, Marco.
All right. Well, super. This is the part 2 of our top 30 leaders in the world, the trade value. Just as a little reminder for all of those of you who missed the first one. So what we're trying to do here is we're effectively trying to create a list of policymakers, politicians in the world, if you were able to trade them. So the person that ends up being top on our list is technically tradable, whereas somebody who ends up 30th on the list, you would trade for the 29 in front of them. Now, there are over 190 countries in the world. So if you are the last on a list, it doesn't mean you're a terrible leader. It means you're better than all of those who we did not put on our list. Also, an important point here is that we're assuming that there are some qualities that are universal to leadership. So just as a reminder, if you didn't follow our part 1, it means that we're basically saying that, these are policymakers who overcome the constraints they face. That's what we like. We like those who make something out of nothing. And unfortunately, yes, that's going to favor, leaders of smaller countries. So in part 1, Jacob and I both submitted our top 30. Obviously, there was a ton of overlap there, but there were 14 leaders, 14 across the two of us, that were either on one or the other's list. And so those were obviously penalized a lot. So even if you were in Jacob's top 10, but you were not in my top 30, you effectively got ejected from the top 30 list, more or less. It's very difficult to be near the top at that level. So we ended up with 44. So I'm going to start off from the bottom. Jacob, you just interrupt me at any point if you want. We can post the list somewhere as well.
Yeah, we will.
We will, yes, for sure. So the 44th is Abiy Ahmed from Ethiopia. That was Jacob's pick. You went deep in your bag for that one. That was a good pick. 43rd was Donald Tusk from Poland by me. Lots of pro-Polish propaganda out there. The Economist had Poland on the cover. Tusk managed to squirrel his way to our top 44. One thing I will say about Donald Tusk, he may be a better EU commissioner than leader of Poland, but let's leave that aside. Slovenia's Robert Golob was 42nd. That was me going deep into my bag. I felt like some Balkan representation from former Yugoslavia was needed. It's more about what Golob has done in disrupting the politics of Slovenia, coming out of nowhere. And it's also just because I'm a huge Laker fan and Luka Doncic is my Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior. So, 41st, Ulf Kristersson. Lots of hate mail from Scandinavia, by the way, for both the 41st and the 39th. 39th pick was Mette Frederiksen, so Danish leader.
I'm surprised that one was controversial. Maybe I'm just off here, but I think she's great anyway.
Well, what I would say is like one of the consistent things that came out of this exercise is that if you are in the West, if you're listening to us from the Western world, which most of our listeners are, invariably you hate your leader. I mean, that is what we have learned from doing this exercise, because the amount of hate mail we got for doing this exercise, where our listeners are like, man, I love the MBS pick. Like, you nailed MBS, but let me tell you about my prime minister of my perfectly run country. They are complete and utter morons. So we got more hate mail for the 41st and the 39th pick than anyone else. Also, there was some constructive feedback about the Nordics. which I thought was really good. And I think maybe we did drop the ball. President of Finland, Stubb, came up
Hmm.
a couple of times. Hey, God bless you for that. Difficult place to run, both because politics in Finland have been in a state of transition, just like they have been in neighboring Sweden. So lots of new parties coming up, the True Finns rising, falling, transition away from a immature populist party towards a kind of a center-right, leadership party. So that was interesting, but also obviously the elephant in the room, largest land border of any NATO country with Russia now joining NATO. So maybe we did ignore Finland here, and
Well,
I'm
I,
very
I I just want to I just want to say I seriously considered Finland. I just didn't include Finland because I'm still mourning the loss of Sanna Marin, who I'm not saying she was a great geopolitical leader. I'm sure we'll get more hate mail if I said that. Just like this is politically incorrect. Had a crush on her. She's awesome. Like I couldn't make the transition. Sorry.
Jacob had a crush on the leader of Finland. That's fair. And then she left, and Stubb just didn't do it for you. So like,
No.
there you go. But yeah, so I do feel like
That
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 was.
by that by the way, folks, that's the level of analysis that we're giving you here. I just want you to understand. Sorry,
Well,
go
I
ahead.
mean, if Mario Draghi was still around, I would have picked him just because I have a man crush on him, as I said. So yes, that is perfectly fine. It's our list, Jacob. We own it. We do whatever we want with it. Egypt's El-Sisi, 40th, Jacob's pick. Kind of jealous of that. Well done. Then Prabowo, Subianto, Indonesia, 38th, also Jacob's pick. A lot of these are very individualistic. The two of us did not necessarily agree on these, but that's fine. We didn't. I'm sorry. I mean, we actually agree on most of these. We just didn't have them on our combined list.
Mhm.
37th, Christopher Luxon from New Zealand. 30. Sorry, that was 37. 36th, Anwar Ibrahim from Malaysia. New Zealand was your pick. Malaysia was mine. 35th. Okay, so you got a lot of hate mail for this, Jacob, and I'm going to let you take all this hate mail. I'm not going to share this with you. You did pick Keir Starmer.
I did.
I think it's defensible, but I didn't want to pick him. And yeah, there was a lot of, again, woe is me. I live in an OECD G20 first world country, and my leaders are terrible. But oh boy, do I love that Viktor Orban. So that's one of those where we got some hate mail.
Well, and
Another
I also just want to say about Kier, like, remember that this list is like you would trade for the people in front of you. So he was number 22 on my list. So I'm saying that anybody below him would want to trade for him. So there's still 21 leaders out there that I'm saying are not better than Keir Starmer. And also just like think of the incompetence that he inherited from Liz
yeah,
Truss and
thank you.
everything else. And things are not like completely broken. Like not to mention Brexit and everything else. Like he is uninspiring. He's relatively boring. He's perfectly competent. Like he's a boring, competent leader of a very fractious democracy. Like that gets him points in my book. That's all. I'm not saying that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's not.
And listen, I'm letting you take this hate mail. I am. I'm not going to share it with you, but I agree with you because he did inherit a terrible situation. He hasn't made it worse. And quite frankly, I put Mette Frederiksen almost exclusively because of her handling of effectively American aggression. Like the United States of America is threatening to seize Greenland from Denmark. She handled that well. I mean, Keir Starmer, just purely for handling the trade negotiations with the US, I think should get some props. I mean, he handled it, I think, better than most countries. Obviously, he got the trade deal first. And so he got out of that wave very, very quickly, which was very, tricky for a Labour prime minister of the United Kingdom.
Mhm.
I mean, he is ideologically opposed. Like ideologically, he and Donald Trump are obviously not on the same plane. So I thought that was I think it's not a crazy pick. The next one, I do think you were completely out to lunch. Maybe you also have a crush on Lula da Silva, but you did pick him very high. I thought that was looking backwards, not forward. He is 34th. We got, I think, a little bit, a little bit of hate mail. I got some text about it. One of my friends, who's in finance, basically said next to the dictionary definition of corruption is Lula's picture. So, 34th. Um,
I
I
mean,
think
that's fine, but literally, show me a leader on here who is not corrupt, and I'll show you a chipmunk that speaks Swahili. I mean, really? You're telling me that politicians and leaders are not corrupt to get to the top? Like, that's not a meaning. I think the pushback that his best days are behind him, that he doesn't actually control Congress, that he's using 2008 policies for a very different multiple environment. And there's no successor. Like, there's lots of different ways I think you could go at the Lula pick. I'll tell you, though, one of the things, and I didn't mention this when we talked about it, I actually used to shit on Lula a lot more and hung out with a couple of Brazilians. And you're going to know who the Brazilians are or what their ideology is based on whether they like Lula or not. But was sort of slapped on the hand, being like, Lula like changed things in Brazil. No matter what you think of him, he's a formidable politician with an idea of Brazil's future, and he got closer to realizing Brazil's potential than literally any Brazilian leader ever, arguably. So like I definitely was like privileging some past performance, but even if you don't like him ideologically, like pre Brazil Lula and post Brazil Lula, like I think he deserves some of the credit there.
I
But
think
I also, yeah,
you
sorry,
meant
go.
pre-jail and post-jail.
Yes, sorry, yes.
Oh no, sorry, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just
No.
well, what I would also say about Lula is that we are modeling this on Bill Simmons' trade value for basketball players, which is awesome. And one of the things that goes into establishing the trade value for a basketball player is not just his skill. So when you think about Lula, he clearly is, over the course of his career, an incredibly adept politician. He wrangled Congress to pass pension reform. I mean, this is like a Maoist, like guerrilla leader, for God's sakes, passing pension reform that OECD gave a thumbs up to. So he's an incredibly skilled player of this game. But the two things that go in addition, in the Bill Simmons basketball analogy of this, is like, how young are they? How much future do they have? So you don't want to necessarily trade a 23-year-old basketball player with a lot of upside for a 39-year-old, 40-year-old LeBron, even though LeBron is better right now. So that's a knock on Lula as well. I mean, to be fair, it is also a knock on my pick of Anwar Ibrahim, who, God's sakes, he's been around for 40 years. The other issue also with Lula is the contract issue, So on the Bill Simmons basketball analogy of what we're doing here, is like, your contract matters. If you're a 23-year-old basketball player, young, you got another 10, 15 years ahead of you, and you're on a rookie deal, oh my God, that's so much better than being in your 30s. Your knees are already hurt, and you are, $30, $40 million a year. With Lula, that's also like, when politicians overstay their welcome. And so I do think that the comp here between the real world and the basketball world, the rookie contract is sort of like the honeymoon phase, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get elected for the first time, or you just seize power in a coup, God bless you, like we're neutral here, but whatever kind of seizing of power you are involved in, those first couple of years, you're kind of on your rookie contract. You're cheap, if you will. You have that fresh new car smell. And so I think that with Lula, that's definitely not the case. So what I would say about Lula is he's like Paul Pierce late in his career. He's still got a chance to hit a game-winning jumper, but he's kind of overweight. He's probably out in the clubs too long, and he's about to launch a podcast with KG. So I would say that Lula is like about 2 to 3 years away from doing a podcast with, like, I don't know, the Kirchners. I don't know, like with somebody.
Well, yeah, and I take your point. I actually think the biggest argument against Lula, and I think he shares this quality with a couple other folks on our list that will be higher up. I think he shares it with Narendra Modi. I think he shares this with Erdogan in Turkey for a little bit, and I think Claudia Sheinbaum, who we're going to give a lot of dap to on this podcast, like, also needs to be aware of this. His legacy as a leader is not looking particularly good. Who is the next Lula? Like, what is the future of the Brazilian left when there's no Lula? He cannibalized the left. What could have been a movement that brought Brazil and his image of Brazil forward for generations has sort of been subsumed, as you said, in this sort of corruption, charisma, personal leadership sort of figure. And I think that's something that Modi is really struggling with. Like, who takes over when Modi's gone? Is the BJP still going to be the BJP when Modi's not on top of it? If you're extrapolating today, maybe not. Erdogan, he's casting about. Is it his son-in-law? Is it somebody else? Like, who's the successor that follows through? And with Sheinbaum too, like, Sheinbaum is the leader of a party that looks like it's going to just be the PRI again. It looks like it's going to try to be a single party dictatorship in Mexico. And even though I think she's very adept and pragmatic and all these other things, what happens when the next person is not and takes the Morena machine and does it for things that absolutely should terrify Mexicans and people who are thinking about the Mexican economy in general? So for me, the biggest shot against Lula is not what he's done so far. I think he's been very skilled, and corruption aside, whatever, these people are all corrupt. But I don't know that his legacy will look particularly good, because I think that he let these things get to his own head. So if I'm arguing against myself, that's I think my weak point.
First of all, to answer your question, who takes over from Modi, I would pay money to see Subrahmanyam Jai Shankar. Jai Shankar, the foreign minister of India. Listen, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's perfectly cool. This podcast is just for normal people. Go on YouTube and Google S. Jai Shankar, the foreign minister of India. This guy, actually, that's not how you say it. It's the minister of external affairs. But the guy's he's brilliant. He's a G. Maybe we should do this for ministers of foreign affairs. That would be kind of cool. The top 10. Like Avi Lavrov is like LeBron, but like we put that aside. I think that Jai Shankar is amazing. He's only 4 years younger than Modi, though, so I don't think he would be really a replacement. But this is an interesting point. We didn't actually think about this legacy question, like who comes after you. That is not something that you would really have in a basketball trade value. Maybe we were over-indexing to it. But Bill Simmons does talk about people who raise the quality of their teammates, right? That is important. And I do think that, when you think about that, who does come after Lula, who comes after Modi, to give AMLO credit, I mean, he did create Sheinbaum.
Yes.
I mean, and he stepped aside, and he's now, sort of like an old advisor, like a grandpa, or like Vito Corleone, right? In Godfather. I mean, I think that's amazing. And to AMLO's credit, he's really he should be high on this list as well if he was still playing.
Well, and I actually do think that, just to close it out on Lula, I do think there is a basketball metaphor here, though, for the trade list, and we had one listener write in and compare Lula to LeBron, and I'm jealous of the comparison because it's dead on. Because like the legacy thing comes in when you're LeBron and you're forcing the Lakers to get Russell Westbrook on the team because you think that's what's going to happen. You're going to leave unless you get Russell Westbrook on the team. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, like you're selling the future. You're forcing your organization to do what you want right now and not setting them up for long term when you retire. So I think there's an aspect of that.
Yeah, that's true. I see that point. That's actually pretty good. And I mean, you're 40 years old and still putting up points, but are they empty calories? Okay, next one is also your pick. So we got 3 picks of yours. 33, Viktor Orban. Hated the pick in the beginning, but I don't hate it anymore. I'm surprised you made the pick,
I felt dirty. I felt dirty making the pick, but this is my allegiance to objectivity here.
No, that's excellent. I mean, and I think, at first, I don't like leaders that are just effective at staying in power. Like that's not what this list is about. This list is about, are you actually good at getting your country to the NBA finals? Basically, this is about winning. This is about making the country better, making it great again. And I gotta say, I mean, Viktor Orban has defended, I think, Hungarian interests very well. And for the most part, he has used his annoying qualities in a really positive way, in which he has extracted concessions from Europe just to kind of play along. And I think that's been quite admirable from an effectiveness policy point of view. Now, whether he has brought, soft authoritarianism back to Europe, the kind of things that the foreign affairs or, God forbid, the Economist would write about, I don't really give a shit about that stuff. That's not what I'm looking at. Maybe in the long term, that will be a problem for Hungary. I'm not sure, but I do think that was a good pick, Jacob. So he is 33rd. I didn't have him on the list, so he slipped.
I think he's good. I think he has a ceiling. Like if your country is facing like other countries that are going after it, or if you're in a real problem neighborhood or something like that, like you'll want Viktor Orban. If you're swimming with the sharks, you want a shark of your own. If you start the upper levels of my list where you're starting to get into open democracies where elections are completely fair and open and things like that, Orban's not going to work in that system. His method of rule is not going to work. And that's why you probably trade some of those people in front of him. Like even if they're not as adept as politicians, like you probably still wouldn't trade for them. But if you're any kind of country that has like problems, or you're thinking about defending your interests in a rough neighborhood, neighborhood, like that's why he earns this spot on the list. Because if you're in that sort of situation, you're going to want this guy. Like this guy is ruthless about pursuing national interests and tying his own future to the national interest. I don't think that's arguable.
Correct. I think he would have done a better job, for example, than Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. So I would have traded him for Benjamin Netanyahu. The other thing I would say about Orban is that I think you might be too harsh on him. I mean, he did also, he was electorally successful even when he was far more committed to liberal democracy. So he's got range. What I would say about Viktor Orban is, if we were comparing him to a basketball player, he's someone who has transformed himself and the way that he plays. He was a down low banger in the post, and he learned how to, he's like Brook Lopez. That's a good comp.
Al Horford. Yeah, I got you.
There you go. Yes, just, kind of annoying. Francis, Vatican, Pope Francis, 32nd. I got to say, this was kind of a joke pick. He ends up being pretty high, but I think he's going to be a really good Pope. So let's move on. All right. 31st, Benjamin Netanyahu, your pick. Here, I do disagree. Unlike Orban, I don't think he is, 10 years from now, after Orban is gone, 10 years after Orban, I think that Hungary is better off than Orban, particularly because I think institutions of Hungary will swing back towards liberal democracy, and only Westerners sitting in London and writing about, other countries disagree with that because they look down on Eastern Europe. So I don't actually have a problem with Orban and what he's doing. It's going to be fine. Settle down. Hungary's not going to go fascist. Benjamin Netanyahu, I don't know. I think he's enabled. I think he's enabled the worst parts of Israeli politics to kind of bubble up to the surface and be normalized, and purely for petty personal interests. I really, really struggle to see much long-term strategy here, but you did have it very, very high, and I think that's, if you look at him purely from a geopolitical perspective, I mean, he has kind of crushed it, and I agree with that. Iran is on the back foot. Hezbollah is hesitating to check their text messages. And Hamas is obviously, basically destroyed. So I do understand that from an effectiveness perspective and a military perspective, he has done really well.
Yeah. Nothing really to add there for me. Just that, he probably wouldn't have made it this high on my list even 12 months ago. But the quick succession of decimating Hezbollah and then decimating Iran like this, it's extremely, it's not something I thought. So maybe I'm over indexing because I didn't think that he was capable of it or Israel was capable of it. But I also think there's no arguing that he understood this threat and he went after it to the point of understanding the United States, understanding that all he needed to do was back Trump into a corner and give him FOMO on foreign policy, and he would help in the war rather than slap Israel on the wrist. He read the room correctly. He's got a hot hand right now.
You know what I would say about Benjamin Netanyahu? My comp for him, I know I said Gilbert Arenas. That's not fair. Gilbert Arenas, other than a few years in Washington, never really took his team deep in the playoffs. I would say Benjamin Netanyahu is Paul George 3. He's playoff B. Remember when the Indiana Pacers with Paul George took LeBron to couple of so but he's terrible, and he's terrible for your team, and he whines, and he's selfish, and he's also, maybe he and Lula will do a podcast together to complete the Paul Pierce and the Paul George analogy. All right, we go from the Vatican to Israel to Al-Qaeda. Ahmed al-Shara. I mean, obviously that's how we go. 30th on the list. He was very, very high on mine. I know you love this pick. I know you're jealous of it. That's fine. We can share it together. The former Al-Qaeda leader of Syria. This is your 19-year-old 7'6" project from France. This is the guy that you don't know if he's going to stay healthy, or in the real world, the equivalent of that would be alive. So you don't know any of those things. You're confused, but just the range is amazing. Great family with a lot of political roots in Syria. This is not some dude that came out of a cave, picked up an AK-47 and decided to be a terrorist. This is a university-educated, frustrated dude, hated Assad. The only way to fight Assad was to join Al-Qaeda. And he did. God bless him. And then he was like, winds are changing. Maybe I should put on a tie and trim my beard. And then here he is on CNN speaking to Christiana Amanpour, which was one of the most fascinating 180-degree turns. From a PR perspective, I think this is one of the highest rated leaders here. This guy's got something. He's got that something special. I'm really fascinated. Was quiet. The only Arab leader that was quiet during the Israel-Iran conflict, the only one that did not disparage Israel for attacking Iran, has been pretty unequivocally anti-Iran this entire time. He's got Trump basically advocating for Syria to be brought back into the international community. It's going to be very, very tough for him. He's basically a draft project, young player, lots of potential, rookie contract, honeymoon period, but he did get drafted by an absolutely terrible team. What is a comp for Syria in the NBA? Probably the Washington Wizards. So, we'll see if he survives, but he's 30th, and I think that's appropriate. I think that so far what we've seen, pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add because I was jealous of the pick, but I will say to our Nordic listeners who were sending them the hate mail, I had Mette Frederiksen up at 12. So as a result of smushing together mine and Marco's list, Mette comes in at 39th on this list and Ahmed Al-Shara is at 30. Would you trade Mette Frederiksen for Ahmed Al-Shara? Just throwing that out there to the Danish listeners. Like just cook with that question for a little bit and then come back to me if you would still make the trade. And if you would, then fine. Then I respect the take. But like just slow down a little bit unless you want the Al-Qaeda guy in charge,
I mean, like he's doing well. I'm pretty sure he's gonna handle the intricacy of pension reform if he can handle the intricacy of ethnic conflict. But we'll see. All right, the next pick was kind of a deep reach by me. I reached into my bag. Eddie Rama from Albania. He's done really great job. You then picked, you went deep in your bag too. This guy was very high on your list, wasn't on mine. That's why he got penalized. But I am jealous of this. Shavkat Mirziyoyev from Uzbekistan, who has transformed the country. Just go ahead. Did you have something to add to that? Hello, you there?
I'm here. You're a little garbly, but I got you.
Okay, sorry.
Can you hear?
Did you want to add anything on Uzbekistan or Albania? Nope. All good?
No, I was jealous of the Albania pick, and I think these are both like really nice, like deep in the bag examples. It'd be interesting to see if these guys could get called up to the pros, but they're doing very well in their spheres.
You then went with Shigeru Ishiba from Japan. I thought that was a great pick. I didn't have him, but I think he's doing really, really well despite relatively tepid popularity in Japan. The Japanese just don't like their leaders ever. So God bless him. He's doing great in the negotiations with Trump. He's the one leader that has decided to hold out for a better deal. Kaja Kallas, another person that was very high on your list, is from Estonia. Got penalized because I did not pick her. I think that was a good pick. Karen Keller-Sutter from Switzerland. I thought this was it's kind of like picking, I don't know, like Tony Parker out of the Spurs. Is Tony Parker really good, or were the Spurs really a great team?
It's not even that. It's more like Shane Battier. It's like a really, really safe pick.
It's a safe pick, but also it's like the system. This is a great example of just the country so well. I think I could run Switzerland. And then we're getting into like the picks where I mean, we're not there yet, but like Abdullah II of Jordan, very difficult situation, doing great. Pedro Sanchez from Spain got a lot of hate mail. Somebody compared him to Merkel because of energy policy. Please look at the data first before you say that. Spain is one of the few places in the world where it does make sense to go hard into alternative energy. So disagree with you completely. There's a boom in data centers in Spain because of their alternative energy policies, because their electricity prices go to zero, for God's sakes. Oman's Haitham bin Tariq, Sultan Haitham bin Tariq of Oman, 22nd. Xi Jinping, 21st. We'll get back to that. Let's hold that thought. Mohammed VI of Morocco. So also for the extraordinary transformation of Morocco is 20th. Top 20. Kasim Yomart Tokayev, Kazakhstan. I went deep into my bag. He was top 5 pick for me. He did not make your list, but because he was so highly ranked, he sneaked into 19. And now Kyriakos Mitsotakis, he was also top 5 for me. Greek prime minister who has led to extraordinary reforms. Volodymyr Zelensky, 17. Hold that thought. We'll come back to him.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now we get into some leaders that we both had on the list, which is why they're so high. These leaders are so high because there's consensus now. Top 15. Basically, Emmanuel Macron at 16. Neither one of us picked him actually this high, but when we aggregated our list, he went up because many of our higher picks, better picks in our opinion, in one of our opinions, just got penalized because they were only on one list. So by default, Macron won, kind of how he won his second term.
Exactly.
Like both of us felt uncomfortable not putting Macron on the list. He did transform French politics for the first time since Charles de Gaulle in a significant way. So we're sitting there like, yeah, okay, fine. He's always in the mix. But most French people are probably lighting themselves on fire for us having him. Well, you know what, guys? You should douse yourself with more gasoline because he kind of squirted his way up higher onto our list. Paul Kagame, Rwanda, also, we both picked him 15th on the list. Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan, 14th. Hey, listen, ball don't lie, right?
Mhm.
Nagorno-Karabakh, not in Armenia anymore, so he is high on this list. Although, obviously, we should caveat this: how difficult is it to win a war when you are washed in commodity proceeds? Friedrich Merz of Germany, number 13. I mean, we're treating Merz here as if, I don't know, he's Victor Wembanyama, or at least what's the kid's name out of Duke? My brain just stopped.
Cooper Flag.
Cooper Flag. I mean, Friedrich Merz is Cooper Flag on this list. Just got picked number 1 in the NBA. We're basically giving Merz a lot of credit. And to be clear, his summer workout YouTube videos are extraordinary. So I do think he deserves it. Erdogan, another guy who squirted his way up because he was on both of our lists. He managed to get to 12. I don't think either one of us really wanted him 12, but here he is.
Mhm.
Lawrence Wong, I agree with. I had him much lower than you did, but I had him on the list, contemplating putting him in top 10. He's number 11. I agree with that. He's young. He just started as the Prime Minister of Singapore a year ago, and so far what I've seen is pretty impressive stuff. Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa.
I just lost your audio.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. Let me do that again.
There.
Cyril Ramaphosa, number 10. Complicated alliance with the DA. He's the first leader of South Africa. It has basically had to reach out to the opposition to create a pretty significant coalition. And of course, his handling of Donald Trump, I think, was very good.
Mhm.
Now, the most controversial part of this, number 9, massive hate mail from Australia. I mean, Australians are quitting. They're unsubscribing from Geopolitical Cousins in droves because they all hate the Anthony Albanese pick. And I have to admit, I hesitated putting him as high as I did. Where was he on my list? He was really high on my list, I think. Oh, no, he was 20th on my list.
No, he was 10th on my list. Bring the hate over here, Aussies. I'm ready for it.
So he was 20 on mine, 10 on yours. He ends up 9 on the combined list. And I think that's too harsh. Like all the hate mail, fine. Maybe he's 10 spots too high. Who cares? I think he's done a pretty admirable job of geopolitical balancing. I think most Aussies that hate this pick don't understand why he's so aloof of America. And my answer is because he understands the world is not bipolar. For the first Australian leader who gets that picking sides so clearly is probably a mistake. So I give him credit for that. What's your defense of Albanese?
Well, it's first of all, it's sort of like Keir Starmer. Like, think about who else is on this list. So if you're in Australia, are you going to trade Albanese for somebody who's lower on this list? Like, would you rather have Benjamin Netanyahu running your country, or Abdel Fattah al-Sisi or somebody like that? So slow your roll a little bit there. I think you're right about look, Australia's defense relationship with the United States incredibly critical for Australian geopolitics. But your biggest trading relationship is with China. You can't just give the middle finger to China in a world that is moving multipolar, where the United States is less reliable in general. And I guess also just with Albanese, like, what's the scandal? Like, what has he effed up? I haven't heard almost nothing from Australian politics has risen to the level of I need to work on this right now for clients ever since he's been elected, because he's just handling shit. Like, is it brilliant? Is he the best Australian leader ever? No, none of this necessarily. But when you start comparing him to some of the other folks on this list. And by the way, doing this exercise makes you realize just how few leaders there are out there that you would even want to be in charge of your own country. But, we're talking about, would you rather have Xi Jinping as the leader of Australia? Would you rather have Pedro Sanchez or somebody like that. Like, I think that if you're judging him relatively and you're looking at his record, he's been competent, even if he's been uninspiring. He's correctly navigating very tough geopolitical seas. Yeah, it's not a full throated. He's the best thing ever. But if you're being faithful to the exercise, I have a hard time seeing why he should be penalized. But I am open to the Australians telling me, no, Jacob, you don't know all these other terrible things that he's done. Please tell me the terrible, awful things that he's done to collapse the Australian economy. Because sitting here in New Orleans, I don't see it. It seems to me Australia's doing okay.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job there. And I do think it was funny how much hate mail we got from Westerners hating their own leaders. By the way, just to be clear, we love the hate mail. Please keep it coming.
Yes, please.
Absolutely no problem. But we will expose you and make fun of you. Like, that is something that you have to take on that risk if you send us hate mail. So lots of criticism of these leaders. And again, nobody in Turkey sent us. It's funny because, a lot of these picks are very controversial in the countries they were picked, but only the Westerners unequivocally hate their leaders. Now we get into
or feel safe about criticizing their leaders. Yeah.
Fair. All right, that is fair. Okay, so let's get into number 9. Sorry, number 8. Number 8 on our list is Javier Milei. High on both of our lists. I think that's
but also a great example of what I was just talking about, because he was 17 on my list and Albanese was number 10. So I say again to the Australians, would you rather have the chainsaw wielding maniac as the leader of your country? Because in my list, no, you wouldn't. There's if you're a certain level of messed up country, yeah, you might want the chainsaw to come out and try and do some reform. But that's not exactly what I would want to trade for in general. But because Milei was on both of our lists, and because he's really doing such an ambitious thing in trying to turn around Argentina, which for over a century has been a basket case, he gets some dap here. But that just to push back against the Australians one more time.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right, and I think a lot of so I'll take two sides of this. First of all, I think a lot of our listeners in the West, they have to understand that this is kind of like, what moment in your life are you in? Like when you're 23 years old, and I'm going to try to do this in a gender neutral way. Okay.
Good for you.
When you're 23 years old, you kind of want someone who's riding a bike and's got tattoos.
Yeah.
When you're 50, you might want someone who's in their mid-30s with a stable job and occasionally likes to ride motorcycles. Right? And so I think a lot of our listeners in the West, they're pretending they're 23. They want a Zelensky. They want a Tokayev. Hell, maybe they want to let their hair down and even go out with Xi Jinping. But the truth is, you're 57 years old, man. You don't need someone who's 23 on a motorbike with a tattoo. You don't need that. That's not what you want. And so I think a lot of our listeners look at someone like Albanese or Starmer, and they're boring. We don't want these guys. There's nothing interesting about them. And I think that's a mistake. Now, that said, we're going to get into some people right now who I think are as high as they are because they have vision.
Mm-hmm.
They have vision. And the problem is if some of these leaders don't have vision. Well, this next mid-30s, non-tattooed, non-motorbike riding person is I think, does have vision. And that's Mark Carney. He's number 7. He was high on both of our lists.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's appropriate. Top 10 leader, incredible range, former central banker who can both talk to you about the Laffer curve and all sorts of other advanced econometric concepts while also shaking your hand and talking about junior hockey because he's got it all. He's got range. He was the central bank governor of both Canada and the United Kingdom, Bank of England, that is, and Bank of Canada. He also comes from a small town in Canada and knows how to please both the crowds wearing the white hats and also how to please the crowd at an investment fund. So I think it's very interesting. And again, he is someone that's higher on our list because there's a lot of potential. He's not particularly young, but he's early in his term and there's more to go. Next one is Narendra Modi. I do think that it's a little bit unfair to Lula, who's 34, Modi's 6. I do think Modi is better at this point in his career. but I do think you can bring up the fact that he's at the end of his career. You're paying a lot for Modi. He's got another 3 years at $50 million a year. That's the kind of player he is. So, that's kind of a problem. All right, top 5. Universally loved, number 1 on Jacob Shapiro's list, and every single male listener between the ages of 25 and 40 absolutely loves this guy. It is Nayib Bukele from El Salvador, coming in at number 5. The crypto king, the Bitcoin baller, the guy who has cleaned up by the way, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so you're welcome. He has cleaned up El Salvador. Everybody swears by it. I do think he has range. I think that you would trade for him even if you were in Canada. I actually think that he would be able to run even an OECD economy because he's got PR, he's got marketing, he's savvy, he knows how to talk, he's got charisma, he's got big ideas. And that's useful in any country. I love this guy. I love this pick. He was number 1 on your list. He was number 13 on my list, but I flirted with putting him in the top 5. And I think I put him too low, quite frankly. I think he should be top 3.
Yeah.
Great pick. All right, next one. Mohammed bin Zayed, leader of the Emirates. Absolutely crushing it. The Emirates are not just Dubai. They're not just about fake islands and other fake things, by the way. Just we're not going to mention what. They're not just about Dubai anymore. They're a financial capital. They're actually a manufacturing hub. If you're flying in an airliner, you're flying in an airplane whose parts were partly manufactured in the Emirates. The other Emirates are coming up. It's not just Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Sharjah is blowing up as well. Abu Dhabi's become a financial center. They're doing some incredible things. Also, did I mention AI? They're probably going to be the earliest adopters of everything. So great job on the Emirates. Also, geopolitics, done well on that front as well.
Fair.
Number 3, neighboring Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salman, he's high on this list, not just because of effectiveness, not just because of dramatic socioeconomic change that has gone on in Saudi Arabia that I would only compare to the Meiji Restoration in mid-19th century Japan. Not just that, but also because of vision. Yes, some of this vision is too much. Yes, some of these projects are not going to happen, but if 30% of this vision is actually articulated, that will be extraordinary. More than that, I also think bin Salman should be number 3 because the reforms that are happening in Saudi Arabia and the handling of geopolitics, particularly navigating the very tricky Israel-Iran situation, is not just good for Saudi Arabia, it's good for the region. Saudi Arabia has decided to become a responsible regional power to reduce its reliance on various militants and various extremists, and that has just made the world a better place, quite frankly. So that's number 3. Obviously, everyone's going to bring up Khashoggi and what happened with the death of that journalist. I would just remind you that the United States of America bombed Al Jazeera's headquarters in Iraq during the war. So, don't talk to us about killing journalists, although I obviously think that's terrible, but that's not what this list is about. And now, top 2. Oh, sorry.
Well, I can't believe I'm really impressed with the moral equivalency between the United States bombing Al Jazeera and Jamal Khashoggi being literally dismembered in a consulate at MBS's request. I think that was young MBS. So hopefully he's a little bit older and he understands that taking off the arms and limbs of the people who disagree with you is not a good way to stay in power. Better to lock them in the Ritz-Carlton and make sure that they give you billions of dollars in order to get out. But yeah. I can't let that one go without some comment, cousin.
I'm sorry, Jacob, but you should hold countries with institutional norms and rules to higher standards, my friend. So that's where I sit on that one. So yes.
Okay, Mr. Meiji.
We disagree on that.
And he was number 3 on my list, by the way. But
do you hear me well?
Yeah, I got you. You slowed down for a second, but you're good now.
It's kind of choppy. You there?
It got choppy for a second, but yeah, I'm good. I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I hear you now. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I got you.
All right. Top 2. Oh man, it's choppy again. Okay. Hopefully it's good now. Okay. Top 2. We got Giorgia Meloni from Italy at number 2 and Claudia Sheinbaum at number 1. So number 1 and 2, both women, both relatively new leaders. Giorgia Meloni, I think, had a tougher time because she had to actually wrangle her own party and win from scratch. Fratelli d'Italia were not in power before. Claudia Sheinbaum was kind of handed the presidency by AMLO, but she has done an admirable job in negotiations with, of course, the U.S. You haven't heard anything about Mexico over the last 4 months, and that is why she's number one. She's number one because she's somehow managed to avoid President Trump. Very tough to be a leader of Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States of America. And obviously, I think that her handling of that situation has rocketed her to number one. We'll see, though, how she, how they both do. But for the most part, nobody really complained about that 1-2 punch. And I think that we did really well
Yeah,
on at least the top five.
I'm surprised that we didn't get more Mexican pushback from Sheinbaum, but that's sort of been true of her from the beginning. Like, I've done a lot of work on Mexico this year, and every single person I've met doesn't like Sheinbaum, swears they didn't vote for Sheinbaum, says she's an awful communist populist who's going to take their money and et cetera. And yet you look at the approval rating, she's 80+%. Morena got a super majority in both houses. And she seems to be going from strength to strength. And even the ones, like even some people who would tell you, like, yeah, I didn't vote for this person, I hate this person, blah, blah, blah. In the next breath, they'll say, yeah, but she's doing pretty good with the United States, or she hasn't been as bad as I expected. So I have yet to meet a full-throated Morena supporter. I almost think that they don't exist because everyone I sort of come across doesn't think that way. But even the people who are against Sheinbaum, I think, are saying she's done a really good job so far. Now, that said, I think there are two things, though, because if I was a Mexican and I was listening to this list and I was anti-Sheinbaum, there were two things I would really push back on. Number one is the cartels and the security situation. And this didn't go very well for AMLO either. And she's got like a significant problem there. And it's not just her problem. Like, Mexican leaders have had to deal with this, and it's an almost impossible problem to deal with. But it's not like she has fixed that or made big moves in fixing that at any point sort of going forward. So I think you can favorably criticize her for that. I think also, though, I mean, there's Sheinbaum herself, who is a relatively pragmatic politician, and then there is, you still there?
Yeah, I mean, I just got cut out. Hopefully that got recorded because that was a great
everything gets recorded locally. So even if you can't hear or I can't hear, like, it's going to be recorded locally. It's just about our ability to communicate with each other. But the second part I was just saying was that, you know, there's Sheinbaum herself, who is pragmatic and savvy and all these other things. And then there's Morena and what Morena is pushing for. And she may be the beginning of a new single party dictatorship in Mexico. And if you are a wealthy Mexican and thinking about your relationship with the Mexican state, you should be pretty concerned about the centralization of power. And you can see Claudia Sheinbaum as the totem of that centralization. You should view her as an enemy. So I think it's actually ironic. I think Sheinbaum will probably be good in terms of moderating some of Morena's worst instincts and good for a large majority of the Mexican population. But if you're that upper crust of Mexican society, like, you should be a little bit afraid of the power that's being concentrated and in some of the things that she has said. So we didn't get the hate mail that I was expecting from Mexicans, but I know from talking to them, like, over the past year, that, like, there's plenty of it, and she's not a perfect pick here. Nobody on this list is going to be perfect. So she was not number one on my list. Like, she is number one because of, you know, when you smush our list together, she's the one that comes up. But even though she was top five for me, like, she does have some warts. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I think that's a great defense, Jacob, and thank you for that. I love it, and I think it's a good pick. I think what you reveal by focusing on those points is that she might be this high for us because we expected worse. And so, you know, I certainly did. I thought she would not do well with President Trump. I thought that she would be far more normative and moralistic with him. And when she countered his Gulf of America gimmick with a Western Mexican United States of America, whatever she said, that was amazing. And I bet you that Donald Trump loved it. I think he was in his office sipping on a Diet Coke going like, wow, like, she gets it. You know, she gets that this is trolling and she's trolling back. And, you know, I mean, it's a silly thing to point out, but that won me over. When she threw trolling back at Trump, that takes confidence. That takes taking yourself less seriously than some of these leaders take themselves. That's the world we're in. And I like that. I think she won me over. But at the same time, that might mean that we are overrating her because we underrated her, you know? And so that's the fear. Now, with Maloney, I just want to say a couple of things in defense of Maloney because Maloney was my number one pick. So
Mhm.
you had Scheinbaum at number, I think, 4,
5. I had
5.
5, and I had Maloney at 7. So
Yeah, so you had I had Maloney as number 1, so she ends up being number 1 because she was number 1 on my list, number 7 in yours. Let me just explain why she's so high in mine. From just an economic performance, this is an extraordinary turnaround for Italy. Italy's uh, debt to GDP has come down from 160, 170% of GDP to 130. So huge decline. Yes, it's still 130, but give her credit. And the deficit for Italy as percent of GDP was in the 12% range, even right after the pandemic. She's gotten it back to 3%. I mean, that's an extraordinary correction in deficit that most Americans listening to this would have loved. So she's done a really good job. By the way, Mitsotakis out of Greece, the Greek economy is actually outperforming the euro area. Meloni's managed to get Italy to be on par with the euro area, which is extraordinary because Italy has a growth problem. But Mitsotakis in Greece, just a little defense for him, he's managed to actually outperform. And the debt to GDP of Greece has come down from 210% to 150%, and it now has a 5% almost positive budget balance. So that's extraordinary. Extraordinary performance by these two leaders. Spain, by the way, massively outperforming the euro area in terms of growth. Debt to GDP is down from 130 to 100%, and deficits are down as well to 2.5%. So all these leaders have managed to, move the Mediterranean leadership has gotten really better in Europe, and I think that's why they're high on our lists. Okay,
yeah,
so
I think so too. I just want to say about Maloney, she's a unicorn on this list, and she's a unicorn because she is this sort of social conservative, leaning right wing, a little bit Eurosceptic, but wants nothing to do with Vladimir Putin and Russia. Like there is a lot of weird Putin love in when you think about Eurosceptic circles and the right wing in Europe.
but
Like
not
think
her.
about the Le Pens,
Yeah,
but
not
not
her.
her.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
she's a one of one. Like I don't know anybody else who could replicate the sort of different ideological things she has put together and to dominate Italian politics the way that she has. I mean, I think I forget if it's Italy or some other country has had like the most leadership
Italy.
transitions since World War II. Like Italy is either
Italy
up there or number one,
with
and she's
Japan.
dominating.
Yes.
She,
No,
she
listen.
so she's sort of like Porzingis if he didn't get hurt all the time.
Oh, bad. She's Dirk Nowitzki, I would say. She's
Oh,
like,
okay.
yeah, the first like tall white dude from Europe who shoots threes that America's ever seen. That's who she is. We're all shocked by her. And that's why she deserves to be in the top 5. I would definitely take her over Bukele. Sorry, no offense. If you're a 25 to 40-year-old male, I know you all love Bukele. That's cool. God bless you. But I would take Maloney for president of anyone, prime minister, or anything. I think she would crush it in Israel. I think she would crush it in Ukraine. I think she would crush it in Canada. I think she would crush it in Syria. I think she would crush it in the Congo. I think Maloney is a badass. And I'll tell you why. She's authentic and she doesn't give a fuck. You do you. Okay? Georgia, you do you. Italy, amazing job. Amazing job. Slow clap. Just nothing to say other than we've got 2 women on the top. And quite frankly, I think both of them are badasses and they would crush in any situation. Now, that's the summary. That's the amalgamated. That's your list. Let's talk about people now that are not on it. And then I want to talk about some people that are on it.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
want to talk about 2 people that are not on the list, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I want to ask you why you don't have them on the list. How dare you? And then I want to talk about 2 people that are on the list that are your picks. And you can ask me to defend mine. I just think that you picked 2 gentlemen that I have to kind of defend for why they're not. They were very high up on the list. So Zelensky ends up being 17 and Xi Jinping ends up being 21. They were very high on your list. You had, let me just see here, Zelensky in terms of your list was number 2.
It was, yeah.
And Xi Jinping was number 6. So if you want me to defend some, we can also do that in that segment. But neither one of us had Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And I think that, it's funny because when I ask a lot of people, who would you have in the top? A lot of them said Putin. And there's a lot of truth in that, and we have to talk about that. But neither one had it on. So let's start with Vladimir Putin. Why is he not on your list of top now 44? 44 leaders. We would take Abiy Ahmed over Vladimir Putin. Why? You and I. Like, what did we
Yeah.
do wrong? What did he do
Yeah.
wrong?
And we need to spend some time on Xi Jinping, because I think I probably ranked Zelensky too high for my own reasons. But I think Xi Jinping is the one where we're going to disagree the most. But as for Mr. Putin, look, he would have been towards the top of this list until he invaded Ukraine. And that was such a big, big unforced error. And also, I think, showed that he was not in reality. Um, like, if you read some of the reports around him at that time, like, he had sort of isolated himself. He wasn't talking to anybody. He was lecturing foreign dignitaries about like 18th century Russian history when they came to visit over the very, very long table. Do we
The
remember that
table,
with COVID?
the
The very
table,
long
Matt.
table. I mean, he didn't even tell, he was so nervous to maintain the element of surprise that he didn't give his generals enough information so that they could actually plan a military operation that should have been a layup for Russia. This is also like, this is something that he said he had fixed. Like, part of the reason to invade Georgia in 2008 was to test out the Russian military. Yes, they crushed Georgia because Georgia was puny, but the Russian military didn't do very well. They had huge problems in coordinating air and land forces in 2008. And Putin was the one who said, we have fixed this. Like, we are going to throw so much money into fixing the Russian military and professionalizing it and modernizing it. And Russia is going to be this modern country and all these other things. And it turns out, no, it's just the same old Slavic, corrupt Saudi Arabia with terrible demographics, and is only a great power because they have nuclear weapons in the first place. I think history will look back at Vladimir Putin. They'll look back at that first roughly 20 years of his rule as some of the most inspired leadership in a difficult country that we've ever seen. But everything that has happened since he invaded Ukraine, he looks like Tsar Nicholas II. And maybe he'll drag on for another 5 years. Maybe he'll drag on for another 10 years. But he made an existential mistake in invading Ukraine, and also in not being able to do it, and in believing that he could do it, and believing his own propaganda that the Ukrainians would welcome him and that he could do the blitzkrieg attack. So I think just based on that, he's off the list entirely, because I think he sacrificed any future of Russia as a great power in a multipolar world for this fool's errand in Kyiv that wasn't actually going to get him anything. All Russia will be now, because of Mr. Vladimir Putin, is a Chinese gas station. Congratulations on your foresight and leadership, Mr. Putin.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even worse than Nicholas II, quite frankly. I think he's Nicholas I, who also had a disastrous war in Crimea and then died or committed suicide because he was such a terrible leader. Alexander II came afterwards and was a badass. So, I mean, look, I actually defended Vladimir Putin more than anyone in my circles from 1999 to 2000 and let's say 8, maybe. Why? Because to understand Vladimir Putin, you have to understand how bad Russia was in the 90s. It was terrible. It was a complete and utter collapse of society. And if Vladimir Putin shows up and he fixes it, he fixes 80% of it. He really does. He fixed it. He crushed it. He stood up to the West, but in a kind of a cool, like, hey, I'm a partner, but like, yo, you got to respect us. We got our own interests. That's all fine and dandy. And then Ukraine. There were several pro-Western kind of revolts starting 2004, 2005, the Orange Revolution. Putin handled that masterfully, coolly, like James Bond. You know, my name is Putin, Vladimir Putin. Like, go ahead. You want to be pro-Western? Yushchenko and Timoshenko, you guys go right ahead. And what happened? They drowned in their own corruption, feebleness, and incompetency. And so in 2010, the election, Yanukovych wins fair and square. Hashtag great job, Paul Manafort. So you've got Ukraine basically swing back towards Russia because Putin was cool, calm, and collected and didn't overreact to this like kind of flirtation with the West. He let the pro-Western leaders of Ukraine do what they do best, which is be complete incompetent fools, and just swooped in through a democratic process. No problem. Nothing bad happened. And then in 2014, when there's more pro-Western protests, he loses his cool. So I don't even think that it's 2022. That's the problem. I actually think it goes back further. In 2014, he lost his cool because let's be very clear. If you annex and remove Donbass and Crimea, and now, of course, Zaporizhia and Kherson, these regions of Ukraine that Russia has captured, there's actually Russian ethnic people living there. Not just Russian-speaking Ukrainians, but actual ethnic Russians. They're actually politically pro-Russian. They're actually anti-Western, the human beings that live there. That's your kind of fifth column inside of Ukraine. That's your permanent, like, space inside of Ukraine that will always vote for pro-Russian, like, foreign policy and so on. So by taking it out of Ukraine, you've created a far more anti-Russian Ukraine. You've left the rest of Ukraine to be a far more sovereign and self-identifiable country. So in other words, not only was the military invasion a blunder, and by the way, I can spend a whole hour on this, maybe we should, because there's a whole lot of folks in the West who think that Russia's doing great militarily. They're not. But not only was the military invasion a blunder, but the fact that you decide to carve up Ukraine is an own goal, because now you've created Ukraine. You know, one thing that I will agree with Putin, and all of our Ukrainian listeners will light themselves on fire and or cancel us, which is fine. God bless you. The one thing that Vladimir Putin is right about Ukraine is that Ukraine kind of didn't exist. Sorry. And you know who agrees with me? The Sociological Institute of Kiev. In other words, there's been a poll that the University of Kiev has been running from the 90s, where they ask Ukrainians, what do you feel like? And under 50% of them have felt Ukrainian. So Vladimir Putin is right up until he created Ukraine and you created identity twice. There's a huge jump in self-identification of Ukrainian people as Ukrainian after the 2014 invasion by Russia. And then another huge jump in 2022. So, you know, if I'm a Ukrainian nationalist, hell, I'm building statues to Vladimir Putin all over Ukraine, because he is probably single most responsible person for the creation of a sovereign, free, and pro-Western Ukraine. And that you cannot abide. And here's why. Your point about demographics of Russia is very important. Ukraine, 43 million people at its fullest. 43 million people who will buy stuff that nobody else will. You know what we buy from Russia? Oil, the rest of us. But you know who will buy like a Russian insurance product or a chair or, God forbid, a car? Ukrainians. This was your sphere of influence, Vladimir. This is 43 million people, which is like a third of Russia. Highly educated, pretty wealthy relative to the rest of Russia, you know, with similar cultural affinity, similar thoughts, similar dreams, similar tastes in music and art and cinema. And yes, also willing to buy your crappy Russian products outside of commodities that none of us would ever want to buy because we don't find them cute at all. That was Ukraine and you lost it. And what you got instead is West Virginia of Europe. No offense to the Mountaineers. West Virginia is fucking awesome. God bless you. But let's be honest, Donetsk, it's like coal mines, all right? Like that's what you got. And I think that's an incredible blunder. Anyone who advocates for Vladimir Putin to be on this list is straight up like just high. Or
Yeah,
Russian high.
if it's pre 2014 or pre 2021, like I think you can make the case that he should be in the top five. But I agree with everything you said. He created Ukraine. He enlarged NATO. He forced the best and the brightest to flee Russia. He he put Russia at the behest of China. He just did all these other different things.
He has single-handedly made me money, and not because I've just done well playing him, but because my crappy real estate possessions in Belgrade, Serbia, that I never thought I would give a shit about, have basically like quadrupled in price. Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you for sending Serbia a bunch of Russian IT experts who have to rent crappy Soviet apartments at egregious prices. So well done. Well done. Slow clap for you.
Marko, that actually reminds me, before I forget to ask, I wanted to ask you why Vucic was not on your list to give the Serbian perspective, because he's been around for a while and he's got some cred. Why did you leave him off?
You know, I think I left him off because there's so much potential. First of all, Serbia has one of the best performing economies in Europe. The investment into Serbia is skyrocketing. It's incredible. And it's all thanks to him. Like straight up. Like he has created geopolitical stability in the country, and basically good relationship. He's one of the best balancing acts out there. The problem is that domestically, I feel that he had so much potential, and that hasn't revealed itself. You know, particularly because he's facing now these student protests, which are massive against his rule. And no, it's not some sort of foreign interference. It's the fact that basically he's a victim of his own success. So let me explain what I mean. Serbia is no longer concerned about security, basic material needs. It's a country that has economic growth, has investment. That's all thanks to him, actually. But the problem is, once you give people a taste of that success, you have to start delivering on other things,
Yeah.
improving governance, improving institutions, and he hasn't done that. The level of corruption, the level of not all of that is on his back, but he's the leader, and he should have cleaned that up. So he's not in the top 30. I mean, I don't think he's in the bottom 190. Many other leaders are much worse than Vucic in the world, but I do think that he's a victim of his own success. And by the way, I defend Vucic a lot with fellow Serbs because there's a lot of criticism of him. And I always say, like, yes, but you wouldn't be criticizing him for corruption and institutional incompetence if the country was still in sanctions or a pariah state and so on. So he's clearly navigated global geopolitics perhaps better than anyone else other than, big countries like India or Malaysia. Like, well done.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, once you've delivered that, people's appetites and desires rise. And so that's why he's not here. But he hasn't done a huge blunder like Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is just, he's the largest fall out of anyone. If we did this 10 years ago, Jacob, I agree with you, he would have been easily in the top 10. He's now not even, I think, in the top 100. Vladimir Putin is an absolute failure over the past 3 years. I would have defended him in the top 5. If we did this in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 100% he would have been in my top 5. He's out of there.
Yeah, and he really squandered. I mean, he had everything going with Ukraine, to your point, the way that he wanted. He had everything going with the EU and NATO the way that he wanted. He had everything with Russia going the way that he wanted, like cheap energy, the rise of AI. Like, can you get people interested in Russia? Like, he just kind of squandered it all. To your point about Vucic, it sounds like there's not a one-to-one player comparison, but he sounds like Tom Thibodeau. Like, he's good for getting you to a certain point, but he can't get you above
yes,
that.
that's a good one. That's a good comp. Tom Thibodeau and Vucic are a good comp. By the way, one other thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
If I could just stick with Vladimir Putin, some of our listeners might say, yes, but the West forced him to invade Ukraine.
Please, Mearsheimer. I hope you're
no,
listening.
But listen, let's say that's true. Let's say that's true. My mother always used to say to me, if your friend Jacob told you to jump through a window, would you do it? It's like, fine. Let's say that America entrapped Russia. God bless America. That's what rivals are supposed to do. America's not supposed to be nice to you, Russia, for God's sakes. Of course, America's trying to get you to invade Ukraine. You don't have to do it. And they did it. They did it. And they didn't do it in 2004 and 2005. They let Orange Revolution burn itself. And you know what would have happened to Zelensky? And we'll get to Zelensky, your number 2 pick. I'm going to get after that. But you know what would have happened if Zelensky didn't have a war? He would have been the worst president of Ukraine probably ever. He was unpopular. He was incompetent. He didn't know what the fuck he was doing. And then Putin invades instead of letting Ukraine fall on its sword as it has in the past. Again, there is nobody, not even Zelensky, more responsible for the success that is Ukraine other than Vladimir Putin. Well done, my friend.
Yeah.
Well done.
And I think we should talk about Zelensky now too. So I'm going to give a brief defense, but I do think I'm wrong. So and then you can take it after my brief defense and tell me why he doesn't belong on this list. I will say 2 things for Mr. Zelensky. Number 1 is incredible courage and bravery. What he did when the invasion started, walking around the streets and like giving the Ukrainian people a symbol that was not afraid and unbowed and pushing forward. That was like, most leaders would not do that. That took a tremendous amount of courage. And most leaders will never reach a moment in their career or never hope to reach a moment in their career where they have to show off that kind of courage. And they either have it or they don't. And he has it. Like, there is something inside of him that said, I will resist, I will push back. And it's admirable. And it's probably why I let myself be blinded a little bit and put him at number 2 on my list. The second thing I'll say, though, and again, this is a situation that most leaders don't want to be in, but when Putin invaded, it wasn't just the bravery. It was, he understood the mistake that Putin made. He called him on it. He said, okay, fine, let's go. You want to do this? Like, we're going to do this. You just gave me the way out of my terrible presidency. And now I'm going to put Ukraine on the map for the next 100 years. And, there have been fits and starts, and he's done some wrong things since the war started. But just, as a wartime president, you can't really ask for much of a better record considering the cards that he held. Now, I'm sure you're about to take him to town for everything that happened before that. And really, the reason I think we should talk about him is because he's a creation of Putin's incompetence. He is not himself a leader who would have scaled the heights and done all these things on his own. He needed somebody to make such a monumental error, trading passing on Chris Paul in the draft so that we could get Marvin Williams with the Hawks, or trading the pick that became Luka Doncic to get Trae Young. Like, you need that kind of mistake in order to get a Zelensky figure. So I know you're going to take him down, but those are my two things in his defense.
First of all, every Russia apologist, sycophant of Vladimir Putin hates me right now, and now every liberal Westerner is going to hate me too, and I love it. The only thing that gives my cold nihilist heart any fucking passion is your hatred. So give it to me. I couldn't care less. All right. So right now, everybody who secretly has a poster of shirtless Putin, and there are many of you out there, I know you hate me, right? But now everybody else who reads The Economist and thinks it's a great publication is going to hate me too. Do you know what my comp is for Zelensky?
No, but
Jacob,
I can't wait.
Jacob, it's Mac McClung. You picked Mac McClung as number 2 in your draft.
Yeah.
You're telling me he's a great wartime president? That's like telling me he knows how to dunk. By the way, if you don't know this because I'm sorry we keep using basketball. We just can't help it. We're degenerates. But Mac McClung, God bless him, he's like a 5'10" white guy who's won 3 dunk contests because he's a 5'10" white guy. But he doesn't play in the NBA. He plays in the development league because he sucks at being an NBA player. Okay, he's not actually capable of making one of the 30, 15-man rosters in the NBA, and that's who you pick for your number 2. This person is so specialized. Yeah, he was a great wartime. First of all, I would argue against that. I think he was great in the first 18 months. We did this last time, so we're not going to go over it. I think he's made some disastrous moves over the last 18 months. I think he's completely lost his space. I think he's unrealistic. And I think that he's cost Ukraine lives. I think he's cost Ukraine territory. And more than that, before the invasion, there's a whole slew of things, including that he got suckered by the US into believing he could get a better deal than the Minsk Accords that the Europeans negotiated for him. Well, guess what? Millions of lives later, 20% of territory later, how do you like that? How do you like them apples? So I think that Zelensky is going to go down in Ukrainian history as a great leader, and he deserves that. Just like Mac McClung is going to go into history as one of the best NBA slam dunk champions, and he also deserves that. And I don't care because it doesn't make him a great leader. So he's not in my top 30.
I don't know that Ukraine exists if he isn't there, or if somebody like him isn't.
So that's the other thing I kind of disagree. I think a lot of people on their list, Jacob, have the temerity over Zelensky. I think they do. Not all of them, I agree. But like sitting there and saying that he's a great leader because of a personal quality that maybe 30% of humans have. Love of your country, sacrifice. Would Georgia Maloney stay and fight? Yeah, fuck, I think she would have. I think she would have looked Vladimir Putin straight in the eye and said, come in, bring it. But I think she would have also known when to quit. I think she would have also known when to fold them, when not to invade Russia with your best troops to get trapped and killed for no good reason. And so, yeah, I do think that the Western myth of Zelensky is like, oh my God, nobody would have done that. That comes out of the Western elites that they truly would not have done it because their kids go to private schools in Bethesda County, and they've never actually done anything dangerous in their lives because they don't come from a place where you have to make decisions like that every day. I think there's a slew of leaders out there that do come from places like Ukraine. I come from one of those places, and yeah, absolutely, I don't see that what he did in that moment. I think it's extraordinary. So I don't want to say it wasn't extraordinary, but I don't think that it was as unique or surprising as I think it is in a Western world where we haven't had a serious conflict in 80 years.
I think this is great because you sent me this email. What was it, last week or this week, where you said that I was a humble elitist and that you're an arrogant man of the people, and we're getting right to this point right here because I don't think that many people would do what he did and risk their lives to do this. And I think the Churchill comparison with Zelensky is overwrought. I think we're constantly looking for the next Churchill because of the myth of Churchill and things like that. But there is an element here because if you read the Manchester biographies of Churchill, which are amazing, and you read the opening of the first book, he basically does this prologue that makes like Churchill is the antimatter to Hitler. That he has many of the same characteristics, he just uses them in favor of liberal democracy and is willing to do all the things and let people die and all of the narcissism and everything else that comes with it, but that when you're in a war with somebody like a Vladimir Putin, like you need that kind of essential quality to push back. And I think in that way, like Zelensky, like he had that thing, and I don't think that most people have that thing. Maybe Maloney, like maybe some of the top fives on our list have that thing, but like as we're going down our list, does Anthony Albanese have that quality? Does I'm sure Paul Kagame does, but like as you're going down the list, like
but Jacob, this is why I don't want to rank him high, because I come from the third world. I come from Serbia. I'm Serbian fully, except for quarter German, which makes it even more likely that I will have this view.
yeah.
Like when you come from that world, those situations are not that far off. You meet them every time you walk to school as a sixth grader. You meet those situations. And so that's why to a Paul, and it's funny you settled on Paul Kagame. You were like, well, Paul Kagame has it. You know what? I also think Abiy Ahmed has it.
Sure.
I also think Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has it. Prabowo Subianto, Anwar Ibrahim. There's a slew of people that come from the non-Western world where there is volatility. There is conflict, there's pain, there's death, and you're surrounded with it. And so it isn't as surprising. But would it be surprising if, Liz Truss stayed in Kiev and fought? Yeah, it would have been. It would have been very surprising. And that's why Western journalists obsess about Zelensky, because it makes Westerners hearken to an era where like men were men and women were women. It harkens back to an era when of that photograph of that Navy guy kissing a girl in Times Square as the war ends. And so we look at Zelensky, we're like, oh my God, we haven't had that in decades. Yeah, but the rest of the world does. And so I'm not going to put him in the top 30, because he stayed and fought for his country, because that happens every day in a lot of places in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you that he should not be in the top 10 and maybe not even in the top 30. I think I over-indexed based on that, but I don't think that we should. I don't think that we should downplay like the extent to which he was successful. I'll turn your point about Serbia around on you. Your Serbian friends who are saying like, okay, you wouldn't have these issues if Vucic hadn't done some basic level of remediation here. I don't think there's a Ukraine if there isn't somebody like a Zelensky in power in Kyiv, and it's not just the courage and bravery. It's also like the assessment of, no, Putin can't do this. Like, I can win this. I will push the right buttons to push back. And the Churchill comparison is also especially apt because Churchill was a fucking terrible prime minister as soon as the war was over. And they got rid of him as quickly as possible as soon as the guns stopped firing. And I bet you the Ukrainians will get rid of him as soon as possible. Like, they'll drive him to the airport and say, go, dine in Western capitals, go make your TV shows again. You did your job, but you are not fit to be a non-wartime leader.
But the problem,
but the question I want to ask you though is, and this is a really fun one, is so I know that neither Putin or Zelensky are on your list, but on your list, who's higher? Would you trade Putin for Zelensky, or would you trade Zelensky for Putin?
Yeah, I would take Zelensky.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I would take Putin over Zelensky 100 times out of 100 times pre-2014.
Of course, but today you would take Zelensky over Putin.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like, no, there's no contest. No contest. Putin has a lot more to work with. He has more resources. He's the catalyst. He has choice. He has agency, and he's using it incorrectly. But one thing I will say, that if you're going to compare Zelensky with Churchill, one thing that I would say is that, first of all, Churchill was a terrible military strategist before World War II. I mean, he's the reason Gallipoli failed.
Go check your history, my cousin. I think he gets a bad rap for that. Okay. And he's also responsible for lots of different advances and things like that. So
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, yes, technological advancements, yes, the tank and so on. But what I would say is that in World War II, he was really good. That's where I was headed. I think that if you're going to defend Zelensky's track record and say wartime president, you can't then ignore the blunders of his strategy as well.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that that's where I think that's why I would probably have him top 30 if he had just kept making the right military moves, but he hasn't. The offensive in 2023 was way too aggressive, way too overbuilt. He didn't know when to start negotiating. And then finally, I think the Kursk invasion was just unnecessary. So I do think that there's a lot of things that he's also done that don't make sense on the military level. So not just
Yeah.
political.
Yeah,
All right, well,
and
we got to
he's a stand-up comic, not a general. Like Churchill spent his life reading about strategy and things like that. Like Zelensky did not. Like, and yeah, so fair point.
that's a very good point too. Yeah, I think he has maximized his potential just like Mac McClung has. Thus, great comp.
Great
Um,
call.
by the way, your video is frozen for me, but I hope mine isn't for you. So I don't know what's going on, but
No,
like,
it's not. I'm fine.
all right,
I'm
cool.
recording here locally, so we're good. I'm sorry, I'm frozen.
No, it's okay. All right, so we got to talk about two big ones, right?
Two big ones.
Two guys that we're gonna keep Trump for the end, but let's do
Okay.
Xi Jinping. So like Xi Jinping. And by the way, please bring up some other ones you want to discuss. But I wanted to talk about Xi Jinping. You had him very high. You had it 6. I did not have him in top 30. Just like with Vladimir Putin, I am disappointed in some of his performance. I think geopolitically, we don't have to discuss it. I think we can probably agree with a lot of geopolitical moves. There's the wolf warrior diplomacy you brought up yourself in the first part of this series as an own goal. Uh, I have 2 issues with Xi Jinping. First and foremost, I think in 2012, when he ascended to power, he decided to wake up a sleeping giant, a giant that was stuck in the morass and the sands of the Middle East. And I think he overly aggressively pursued some of the national security interests of China. There is absolutely nothing that China needs to do. There's nothing inherently necessary in the South China Sea. You don't have to start pushing into the South China Sea in 2012. You can wait until 2030. The United States of America is today, 2025, it's July 9th, 2025. The United States of America is spending its tax dollars on ensuring the security of Chinese oil supply. I mean, that's literally what's happening today. The Fifth Fleet in Bahrain is not securing my gasoline, it's securing your gasoline, Xi Jinping. So you have actually not done anything to improve that situation. And by waking up the United States of America to the assertiveness of China, I think that he accelerated the need to challenge the United States too soon. So that's the first issue. I think that was unnecessary. The 2020s could have been the decade where China wakes up America. It didn't have to happen in 2010s. The second thing I would say is that China was on the path towards a lot more entrepreneurship and innovation. I mean, it has a wallops of it already, so it's not like they're doing poorly. I mean, obviously EVs. There's a lot in the financial sector where the payment technology is much better than ours. There's
Biotech.
biotech, yes, biotech for sure. But that could have been better. Why tinker with the model? Now, yes, there is income inequality. I agree with that 100%. But do you improve income inequality by stifling innovation? Or do you improve income inequality by creating, things that a communist party should care about, like a healthcare system, like a social security and pension system? Those are the things that the state is failing to provide in China. It's not entrepreneurship and income inequality of the top that's the problem. The problem is that the state provides very scant uh, very scant social welfare network. And that's, by the way, the root of many problems in China. The reason that people buy so many condos is because they expect to sell them so that they can get dentures when they're older, so that they can, heal themselves when they're older. That's the imbalance in this economy. And quite frankly, this guy's been in charge for 13 years, and he has not addressed that social welfare state that's actually pretty poor. America and China, in many ways, similar. I mean, one of them is that they don't rebalance income inequality, and they don't have the level of government spending on social welfare state that I think an advanced economy would have. So I think that's another failure. So those are my two problems with Xi Jinping. I think he challenged the U.S. unnecessarily early. Seems like an ego play, quite frankly. He ascends to power, so China must then, at that moment, challenge the U.S. I thought that was unnecessary. And then the second thing is, he and his government have talked about social welfare state. They understand how important it is in reducing leverage to condos and real estate, but they haven't actually addressed it significantly.
Yeah, you and I disagree on this, and maybe I have rose-tinted glasses when it comes to Xi Jinping. This is the first thing I can think of as cousins that we truly are on opposite sides of this. I think you're reading his embrace of Chinese nationalism in 2012 and 2013 wrong, and I think you're underestimating just how bad the situation was in China when he became leader. You had, Deng Xiaoping eventually leaves the scene, and then you have, by consensus, these rulers who are coming in every 5 years. And China's becoming fabulously wealthy, but it's also becoming even more corrupt and it's becoming even more unequal. And you get to the point where the factions can't agree on who the next consensus candidate is going to be. And they end up on the middling person that everybody can agree, okay, fine, we'll do that because he doesn't give me everything that I want. And they pick this guy, Xi Jinping. And I think when Xi Jinping comes into power, he thinks that something is fundamentally broken in China. And that if he does not fix things, this system and the Communist Party underneath it is going to come apart at the seams because the ideological legitimacy of the party is dead. It was all gone. It was all these corrupt parties with your bougie lies and Lamborghinis everywhere and people hanging out on the coast having great parties and people in the interior less than $2 a day. So, like, the ideology of communism was dead. And he needed to buy some time to rebuild communism and rebuild that sense of social equality and the welfare state that you're talking about, while not having people come at him with a knife. So I think he started with this notion of Chinese nationalism, and yes, starts playing around with the South China Sea and Taiwan because communism is nothing. It's bankrupt at this point, and he needs to give the Chinese people something other than, hey, like, the preternatural growth you've had for the last 30 years, it's not going to happen for the next 30. We can't deliver that to you. So I have to give you, the state has to give you something else rather than the growth that you've become accustomed to if you're going to continue to believe in the system. And by the way, I've got all these local governments and these military guys and these bougie lies that are running around that have way too much money and way too much power. And if I don't do something here, we're closer to warring states than you might think. So I think he takes that first period of time to do that, to purge people, to get rid of people, to reassert the Chinese Communist Party and what it's supposed to stand for, to get people accustomed to the idea that, okay, like the last 30 years, the growth you've seen, it's probably not going to be like that for the next generation. I need you to buy into the state. I need social stability. I need you to think as the state of the arbiter of equality. And also, I need you to have national pride in China as a national project, because obviously and ironically, the communism with Chinese characteristics wasn't quite doing it. If you go back to Xi Jinping's early speeches, and he still talks like this, he sounds like Ronald Reagan. He talks about supply side reform and things that belong in like 1980s Western deregulation narratives that are coming out of the president of China when he's sort of first in power. Now, I think you're absolutely right that he went off the rails. He went too early around 2018, 19 when he's doing Wolf Warrior stuff and he's got the first Trump presidency. I think he overestimated how strong he was at that particular moment. And I think it's actually a good sign of a leader who recognizes a mistake and walks it back. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that for all your shade thrown at The Economist, you sound like somebody who reads The Economist when you're kvetching about China and its private markets. This is exactly the thing that Xi Jinping diagnosed. He's been talking about it since 2015, and he's been trying to do it. And doing it in a country like China with 1 billion people, with a sclerotic, authoritarian, Marxist, communist system is really fucking hard. So that's why he let the real estate bubble pop, because he wants Chinese people to do what the Indians are doing. He wants them to go put their money in the market. He wants them to trust the market enough that they will do that rather than buying the third or fourth condo. And he hasn't been able to pull it off quite yet. He still doesn't have the average Chinese person trusting the market the way that they want. But the flip side of this is that he knows, as Deng Xiaoping knows after Tiananmen, if you give too much freedom, if you give too much openness, it will be a challenge to the Chinese Communist Party. So yes, we need to stimulate innovation and growth and all these other things, but it also needs to be at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party. So that's why in I think it was 21, or was it late 2020? I forget. He gets the leaders of the major China tech companies like your Tencents and Alibabas and says, okay, you guys need to make sure that X% of your budget is going towards social welfare in China and devoting money to things that actually make things better for Chinese people. And companies like Tencent said, yes, sir, Mr. Emperor. And people like Jack Ma said, no, sir. And look what happened to him. And look at what happened to the Ant IPO. He had to make an example of them, just as he made an example of Bo and he made an example of the real estate market, so that a couple of years later, he could start to loosen the ties and say, okay, now you understand how serious I am. You also understand that the United States is coming for us in the long run. You need to align yourselves with the state. So I think it's unrealistic to suggest that China is going to replicate what worked in the West. They have to have a version of openness and tech innovation that also allows that Communist Party to maintain its power base. And maybe it won't work. Xi Jinping has not announced a successor. He's getting old. There's some weird stuff. And then, like, he didn't come to the BRICS summit. Like, the biggest risk to him is, like, what if he gets hit by a car tomorrow and there isn't a successor? And he hasn't been able to work out some of these things in time. But I just think in terms of degree of difficulty, in terms of vision, in terms of the scope and level of the challenges that he's gone after, and he has every single rival he has either eliminated or eviscerated or put in a gulag somewhere, and he's hanging on the global stage, and people are thinking better of China than they are in some places of the United States. Like, all those things together, like, I see a leader who has done a very, very good job and who was dealt a very, very bad hand at the beginning. So that's my defense of him.
Yeah, I mean, my counter here is that I think you can do anti-corruption drive, which I agree with. I think that that was correct. That was genuine. In the West, a lot of people thought that Xi Jinping was just taking out rivals, but it was genuinely an anti-corruption drive. It wasn't just about the dragons, it was about the flies as well, right? That was the kind of focus of the government. I think it can be successful without making the other own goals. I think where we disagree is that you see everything as sort of centrally about the anti-corruption drive. And so you're saying, like, look, he needed to ramp up nationalism in order to also pursue something that was good for China. So I think we disagree on that. For a part, that's just fine. But I don't. I agree with you that in 2012, going after corruption in China was extraordinarily difficult, and he has, for the most part, really been successful. The part where I disagree also is the supply side reforms. You said he sounds like Reagan. I'm okay with him letting the real estate bubble pop. And I'm okay with some of his supply side reforms that focused on dirty industries and sort of antiquated industries that he's gone after. My problem is that when he started interfering with private business in a very haphazard way. So you mentioned going after tech entrepreneurs. Fine, telling Tencent to pay effectively a higher corporate tax rate is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, Jack Ma disappearing. I'm talking about waking up on the wrong side of the bed and saying, like, you know what? Computer games are anti-revolutionary. Or like waking up on the wrong side of the bed a different day and saying that, tuition programs are anti-revolutionary. And so it's that kind of like helter-skelter intervention in the private sector and in the tech space that's not very hands-off, laissez-faire-ish. And I think that that's the one thing where, again, he didn't really have to do that. You can, like, it's just not necessary, like,
No, I think it is necessary. If you're Xi Jinping and you've been dealt the cards that you have, it absolutely is necessary. Yes, the video games are counter-revolutionary. And yes, you don't want the students going to the universities to learn about the rest of the world. That's absolutely counter-revolutionary.
I know, but then,
China gets in trouble when the emperor doesn't have control, when the hills
but
are high and the
yeah, but
emperor's far
that's,
away. He needed control, but also needed to let China still innovate and grow. And that's the weirdest thing about China. It's become more authoritarian and yet more creative and more innovative. And in
oh,
our
no,
Western language, that's not supposed to happen. He's not supposed to be able to do the things that you're talking about that make us both uncomfortable. And yet, China goes from strength to strength when it comes to innovation and technological
but I'm
development.
not
But
sure
that's what's happening.
but how do you know it's going from strength to strength? Like, what are we comparing it to? I mean, it's a counterfactual.
Look at their education system, look at the PhDs that they're minting, look at the patents that they're getting, look at
But
their
maybe
share of like
he could be
biotech
doing more.
startups and all these other different things.
But
Okay,
maybe,
sure, but they're already outclassing the United States on these things with what they're doing.
I know, but like the economy is clearly sclerotic. So like letting the real estate bubble pop has not been replicated by another source of growth, right? And so that pivot did not happen because he has stifled the private sector. And he has stifled consumption, and letting the real estate bubble pop was then complemented with very antiquated ways of solving it. So in other words, he didn't listen to Richard Koo. He didn't offset that decline. It's very painful deleveraging. And some of the ways that you're defending him suggest that it's like good for him but it's not. I'm not sure that it's really good for China. I'm not sure that China is better off in 2025 than it would have been with somebody who could both be anti-corruption and semi-authoritarian. Which like I kind of agree with you. It is to an extent relevant for China at this point of development, but at the same time could have done other things better. You
Yeah,
know,
well, it's a
and I
semantic
guess
thing, but I wouldn't say that he stifled consumption. I would say that the problem of multiple Chinese leaders, including Xi Jinping, is that the Chinese penchant is not to consume for exactly the reasons you think about political mistrust. And you're right that he has not been able to move them towards consumption. I think part of the impulse around national pride is to buy Chinese. Like, I want you guys to consume more. I don't want you to just buy condos. And he has not been able to do that, but I don't think he's stifling something that was happening. He has been trying to beat the dead horse to do the thing, as have previous Chinese leaders. And the Chinese people are just like, we remember Mao. Why would we do this? We're going to invest in things that make more sense rather than what you want us to invest in. And this, I think, also is a good it's a good comparison, because let's think of our boy Bukele. It's easier to put Bukele as number one on my list because the scale of what he's dealing with is so small. Like, El
mm,
Salvador is a
that's a good
really,
point.
really small country. If you
Yeah,
put
with
Nayib
one problem.
Bukele,
Yeah,
yeah, with one problem. If you
big
put
one.
Bukele in charge of China and he tried to do that, how many tens of millions would be dead and in
Well,
gulags if you tried to do the same thing? And Xi Jinping, and this is one of the
yeah,
things that I think is so interesting about him, and history will tell if it's positive or not. Remember, his father was purged by Mao in the Cultural Revolution. Like, Xi Jinping's childhood was fucked up precisely because he experienced Maoism at its height. And he envisions himself as a Mao or Deng Xiaoping level leader, but one who has to give China that level of control without the chaos. Because if he brings the Maoist chaos, he will, self-defeat everything that he's going. So I would be the first to admit to you that yes, he has errors and problems and unforced goals and all these other different things. But again, I would just go back to the scale and the degree of difficulty on the problem and what he's been able to do in advance of that. Like, that to me, like, gives me
that's
like
fair.
some, like, if you put him in charge of the United States today, he'd be like, this is so easy. What do you mean? I get to do all this stuff and I don't have to worry about all these other things? Like, piece of cake. Let's go. Like, that's how I see him.
I think he does deserve a lot of credit for pivoting out of some problems he created himself, unlike Vladimir Putin, who likes to triple down. So, you mentioned that yes, he woke up the United States too early, but he didn't like triple down on that.
No.
So that's a good point. I think he's pivoted out of the anti-corruption campaign when needed, pivoted out of zero COVID when needed. He has the ability to calibrate, which is a huge, huge quality that ironically a lot of leaders just don't, because they become overly ego driven. They can't change things. I think you've convinced me. I think he deserves a top 30 status. I will say that. And certainly when I left him off my list, it wasn't because I saw him as negative as Vladimir Putin. I mean, in my view, Vladimir Putin is in the bottom 30%. To me, Xi Jinping is somewhere in the top 60, 70, but, I think you've made a good case for why he should be in the top 30. So that's a very fair defense. He ends up, where is he again on our updated list? He ends
He's
up
at
at,
21.
I think
So
I'm comfortable with that. I think ball don't lie. And our advanced AI mathematics has put him at 21st spot after you put him at 6th and I didn't have him. I think that's appropriate. Um,
well, and just last thought on him before we move to the elephant in the room, President Trump. Like, I think that Xi Jinping is also in Vladimir Putin territory. Like, this is a very, very dangerous period in his rule because it's his third
Interesting.
term. There's no successor. Like, he's facing, like, the walls are closing in a bit. He's facing a United States that is not just waking up, that is completely woken up and is going after China
Mm.
meaningfully. It's one of the only bipartisan issues. And Xi Jinping has not announced a successor. Like, there's a very real sense and he could make a strategic error tomorrow and he could drop down this list the way that Putin did. Like, if Xi Jinping ordered an invasion of Taiwan, he would fall to like 180 on this list. If he dies tomorrow of a heart attack and he has not put in a system for picking the next ruler, and you get factional disagreements and maybe even internal fighting in China about what comes next, then he gets like put down this list as well. So I think he's at a very dangerous moment where he's been leader for this long. Maybe like the Kool-Aid is starting to go to his head. Maybe he's just getting old. Who knows? Like, it's a very precarious position for him. But I do think, like, based on what he's done so far, like, it's a high degree of difficulty and he's done a good job.
The man is spring chicken. You know what I mean? 73 years old. He's young,
Yeah.
72. Man, 72. He just turned 72. My God, what a world we live in. All right, let's go to the elephant. The elephant in the room is Donald Trump. I was shocked by the surprising low number of, well, actually, nobody wrote in with a problem with that. One listener said they were surprised that I didn't have Donald Trump on the list because I've defended him on our podcast probably more than you have. Um, and so I'll just kick off why I did not put President Trump. It's
Yep.
very difficult to gauge the performance of a U.S. president, and the reason I say that, I know to a lot of you it's very easy because you just hate him, and that's cool.
Or
Have
love
fun
him.
with that. We have fun with that, or love him. Um, but the problem is that the United States of America is the most powerful country in the world. Like when we ranked countries, it's number one. It is really difficult to gauge performance. And the reason I say that is because President Trump, he's very tough in negotiations. And you get to do that when you are the most powerful country in the world. So that's why it's very tough for me with any US president to really gauge whether or not they are doing a very good job. The other issue is that I think that President Trump quite often identifies issues like hinge issues that need to be fixed. I think he's very good at that. And I would give him a lot of credit on that. But the problem is that he then uses rhetoric that makes it more difficult to solve that problem in the domestic political context because he's not Xi Jinping. He's not Vladimir Putin. He doesn't run a country where he can just use executive orders to change the world. He does need to go through Congress. And so you're often sitting there and you're like, wow, you really identified an issue that needs to be solved. Well done. But why did you say it like that? That's unnecessary. So I think that his governance style often makes it more difficult for him to get things through Congress. And by the way, he's got about 12 months left until we got the midterms and he loses the House, which he will. And at that point, what happens? I mean, everything is going to grind to a halt. He's not going to get anything done. So to me, immigration reform is a clear thing that needs to happen. That is something that he needs to do. I'm not sure if that's going to happen given the way that he has gone about enforcing immigration policy right now. So I think that his rhetorical style is not very conducive to compromise, and ultimately compromise is what's needed, even if his end goals are far more moderate than his critics actually accuse him of. So those are my two problems. I don't know how to gauge President of the United States of America who has awesome power before them. They can wield incredible power. It's difficult to gauge any US president, not just Donald Trump. How would Barack Obama deal with being a president of El Salvador? How would Donald Trump deal with being the prime minister of Italy? How would that work? I'm not sure. It's difficult to say. And I'm not sure that his style would work in a mid-power or another country. So if I am, picking the next leader for Belgium, would I pick Donald Trump over Georgia Maloney? And the answer is just no. No, because I don't know if he has the range to be a leader of a smaller, less powerful country. And then the second thing is I think his heart and his brain are often in the right place, actually. And this is where I disagree with most of his critics. The problem is that his execution and the rhetoric leaves a lot of things desired.
Yeah. So a few things for me. If I'm being honest with myself and if I'm looking at my list, I feel pretty comfortable him not being on the list until I start getting down to like Prabowo and Aliyev and Sisi. And there's a part of me that says, you know what, maybe he slots in there because everybody above that, no, I would trade Trump for in a heartbeat. But you start getting to some of those lower names on my list, like Paul Kagame. I think I'd rather have Donald Trump as president of the United States than Paul Kagame or Abiy Ahmed or some of these others. Like, so maybe I need us to be a little
But that
nicer to
is
Trump on the
but
list.
those are overflow candidates. Let's just be very clear. Those are 30 to 44. So,
Yeah, so
I think
it's
yeah,
it's
he's in
it's
that
there.
range. I agree. Yeah.
But I think there are four main points that I would make for why I didn't have him on my list when I did it. The first is, and there might be some others on this list who are guilty of this, but he's guilty of it more than any of them. The dude was born with money and influence. And that makes a big difference. Like Xi Jinping, who we were just talking about, I mean, he had to rehabilitate himself in the context of Maoism to ascend political circles. Donald Trump was born with billions in his mouth. He was born with the silver spoon. I could become, I think, a successful politician if I had billions of dollars in my back pocket. And I think most people could. So like, I think that meaningfully like matters. And if you're thinking about politics as a skill, if you've already got the money, if you don't have to worry about it, like it makes it easier to do it. The second is, and you sort of touched on this, Trump, he has incredible instincts for power. Like he understands power instinctually. He understands where to put leverage, the Mr. Dealmaker in chief, all these other things. Like he's very, very good at that. He is just as bad at strategy as he is good at instinctual sense of power. If the guy ever cracked open a book and learned anything, maybe he'd be one of the best statesmen of all time because he's got instincts, but he has no sense of strategy. He does not think about the future at all. Everything is, how does this feel now? What do I think about this now? Why is this happening now? I'm going to tweet this. I'm going to think about this. It's all raw instincts, and it's a source of some strength for him, but he has shown zero capacity to think long term. And I don't think you get on this list if you can't open a strategy book, or if you can't sit through a briefing, or if
By
you
the
need
way,
pop-up pictures in the briefing, yeah, go ahead.
so I know you have two more, and that's perfectly fine. I just want to piggyback on this and say, but that's why I say I'm not sure he would be good with a mid-tier power like Belgium or Malaysia. My concern with him is that you get away with a lot of shit because you're the president of the United States of America. If you want to tweet at somebody, you know, if you want to tell Iran and Israel they don't know what the fuck they're doing, you get to do that because you're the president of the United States of America. So when you say like he sometimes this instinctual gut feeling to act brashly works in his favor, I 100% agree with you. A lot of the Trump fans say that he is who he is and that's why he's effective. I agree. I don't disagree. I just don't think it would work with any other country other than the United States. Maybe Russia, maybe India, maybe China. But like, if I'm sitting here trying to like trade my leader of South Korea, and by the way, do they need that? If I'm the general manager of South Korea, trying to pick my next leader, like I can't pick Trump. No way. He's gonna say something stupid, and then I don't have 11 aircraft carriers with which to say, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, my leader called you fat. Like you just can't do that. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think the jury's still out on the new South Korean leader. We can talk about that later. But yeah, I agree with that, and I'll sort of get to that in a second. The third thing, though, and I'm not saying, I hope I'm not saying this pejoratively. I think this is just objectively true. I mean, we went after Benjamin Netanyahu for this. Trump is all vanity and all narcissism, and he's using the office to enrich himself. Look at all these crypto projects that he's announcing. Like, he fundamentally does not give a crap about anyone but himself and the Trump name.
Well,
And
wait a minute. Wait a minute.
no.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
Jacob,
okay. You want to defend him? Fine. I think it's fairly clear that's
I will
true. But please.
I will just throw back at you what you said to me when I accused Lula of being corrupt. Aren't they all corrupt, Jacob?
They are all corrupt, but I didn't say that. Yes, they're all corrupt, but I didn't go at him for being corrupt. I went at him for being vain and narcissistic. I think there is no part of him that actually cares about the nation. I think it's all Trump, Trump, Trump. He would change it to the United States of Trump if he possibly could. Lula, corrupt, all these other different things, cares deeply about Brazil and the future of Brazil, and has hitched his wagon and his changes to Brazil rising up and being this. Trump, no way. Like all this stuff with the crypto coins and the Trump tokens, and I'm having the dinners, and I'm not going to put my assets in a blind trust like every single other president before me. It's all about enriching. I want to build Trump Tower in Gaza and Trump Tower in Serbia. Like, come on.
Well, first of all, Trump Tower in Serbia will be amazing because
Sure,
it's going to be built on the burnt out husk of the defense ministry. So that needs to happen. Please, Jared, don't back out of that. Please build it. But look, what I would say to you is on that point, I don't know if it's exclusive. Can you be narcissistic and vain and also think at least that what you're doing is in interest of the United States of America?
You can. I don't think that's him. I think that was LBJ. I don't think that's Trump. What I'm saying is I really don't think he gives a shit about this country. I don't think he gives a shit about the community that he's in. I think he gives a shit about himself.
I think on some level.
And that to me just disqualifies him from the list, because everybody on this list, even the Netanyahus, have some sense of their country's national future. And this goes back to the instinctual comment that I made. I don't think he thinks long term. I don't think he thinks strategically. I think he thinks about what's good for me now, and about using power in order to get those things. And if he could put those tools in service of a higher strategy, like, he would be incredibly potent and competent, but he hasn't done that. And that gets to the last point, which you already sort of said, but I'll just repeat it. It's so easy to be the president of the United States compared to every other country that we've talked about. The United States is the most geopolitically blessed country in the history of human civilization. We've got the energy, we've got the people, we've got the geography, we're separated from enemies, we're not surrounded by anybody else. And he doesn't have to be there when the wars are actually being fought. He's sitting on a military that spends 10 times, or the next 10 countries combined, their military budgets align with the military budget of the United States right now. It's super easy. And in his first term, he had some huge missteps. Like, he basically had a Bay of Pigs light with Venezuela. COVID and the lockdowns happened under this dude's watch. Like, don't forget that, Republicans. Like, he was the one controlling the levers at the time, and he was the one who, okay, yeah, he insulted Fauci a bunch. Did he do anything about it?
Well, I mean,
No.
I think COVID is both his best and worst. I mean, Operation
Warp Speed is his best, but his response to COVID, some of his worst. The way that he's bitching at the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates 300, you start going through the stuff. Like,
listen,
it's just.
Here's what I would say. Let me try to encapsulate what you're actually saying. I think that in a way, his instincts, his brashness, his creativity, his bullying, all of those things are why I think Trump's foreign policy is actually much better than people think. Like, the way he handled the Israel-Iran thing was really good. I mean, Israel wagged the dog, the tail being America, so he had to kind of go along with it, but he finished it. He finished it quickly. And you've got the Iranian president on Tucker Carlson for 30 minutes, basically sucking up to Trump. I don't know if you watched it. Please do. Incredible 30 minutes of television. The president of Iran, after being just spanked by the United States of America, is basically glowingly sucking up to the United States president. So here's what I want to say. I've always said this. I think World War III is far less likely with Donald Trump as president than Kamala Harris. That's just my objective. We can have a whole hour for why. But one of the reasons, and by the way, that's important, right? Like I think, and one of the reasons is that, yeah, he's kind of an asshole in many ways, but in a way that limits further conflict. He's amoral. And that really works well with geopolitics and foreign policy when you are the leader of the best country.
When you're the leader of the most powerful country.
Exactly. So you and I cannot give him credit for his instinct, his abilities, because he's the leader of America, but we have to criticize his predecessors who did not do that, who were too moral and preachy and didn't know how to pivot out of difficult corners like Israel-Iran tensions, which I think President Trump did not give anywhere near enough credit for how he handled that. That was masterful, fucking masterclass of game theory. And so that's where we can't give him credit, because he's the leader of the best country. And it's yeah, but other leaders have done much worse. But again, we can't put him on a list of top 30 because who cares if his predecessors were morons? So that's the first thing. Whereas where I disagree with you is when you say being a president of the United States of America is very easy. Yes, on foreign policy side, all you need to do is not be a moron who wants to triple down on normative issues. Stop it. It's not 1993. No, you're president of the United States of America. It's a multipolar world. You kind of have to be an asshole. So that's true on the foreign policy, but on the domestic side, it is actually difficult to be a president of the United States of America. It's not maybe as difficult as you made Xi Jinping's job in 2012. Great defense of Xi Jinping. It's not as difficult, perhaps, as Brazilian politics, but it is really difficult. And you yourself, you've made a comparison that you and I came from independent sides, and we've done the same thing to clients, comparing Brazil and America. It's complicated. It's difficult. Being a prime minister of Canada is far more easier. Why? Because prime minister of Canada is an elected king. Prime minister of any parliamentary democracy is a king for 4 years. You can do whatever the fuck you want. You got parliamentary majority or a coalition, you good. In the United States of America, it's very complicated. And that is where his brashness and his, short-termism, as you put it. But I would say just like being led by his own gut and instinct, it kind of falls on its head because domestically, it's not easy to be a president. You need to be more nuanced. You need to build coalitions. And I think that quite often he sees a potential solution and then he doesn't get to it because in the domestic arena, it's not as easy as just saying Israel and Iran don't know what the fuck they're doing. You can't just be the dad that shows up in the room, says, who started the fight? I don't care. You smack both kids and go back downstairs to reading your newspaper. Like, you cannot actually just do that on the domestic front. So that's where I would say, you know, the qualities Trump has, we can't give him credit for it on the geopolitical side. But on the domestic side, they don't actually work.
No, I don't think they work at all. And I think his thin skin, he's his own worst enemy when it comes to these things because he'll have an idea that might be good, but then somebody tweets something at him and he completely does a 180 because he doesn't like being insulted or something like that. Like the Trump always chickens out thing. Like there's a real aspect to that. I also, you and I have talked about the one big beautiful bill a couple times now. I'm slowly working my way through the 1,000 pages, but it looks like a massive own goal to me. The federal Medicaid cuts as a percentage of total Medicaid spending are nearly double what Reagan did in 81 and 82.
You still think it's stimulative?
I do still think it's stimulative. We can get to that in a second, but I'm just saying, like, how does it make political sense to cut Medicaid, like the percentage of Medicaid spending by almost 10%, almost double what Ronald Reagan did? All you're going to do is close down rural hospitals and lead the people who voted for you most passionately to die. Like, I don't see any other sort of outcome of that. Or look at the cutting to SNAP and things like that, giving ICE a budget equivalent to Italy's military while you're also cutting these Medicaid things. Like, what?
Whoa. That could be Georgia Maloney's fault. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm just saying it's also roughly the budget that Israel has. So Israel is pretty good.
The one big beautiful bill, let's just be very clear here. If Kamala Harris had gotten elected as president, she would have had to pass something as well. There is absolutely there's no way that we would have let 2017 tax cuts expire. That's just a fact. And so, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, they would have both had to put all sorts of bells and whistles to get it passed. And it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, I don't disagree.
But no,
with you
it's like the policy errors. Like, so you're going to cut, and I don't mean this like I hope listeners are not thinking that I've been overtaken by Trump derangement syndrome. This is actually like literally, I don't understand what the political logic of this is. I don't understand how it makes political sense to cut something like Medicaid, but then to do like Trump accounts, you're going to give $1,000 to every kid that's born in 2025 and beyond. I think you should retroactive that to 2022 when my first daughter was born. And you're gonna drive immigration down. Like, I don't know if you've seen the migration numbers at the border.
Oh, yeah.
They've tanked. They're at record lows, which on the one hand, good job dealing with the crisis. On the other hand, we also need immigration in the country from a growth perspective. So if immigration is going to zero because you've cracked down too hard, like that's going to show up in growth.
Well, this is where...
I'm having trouble making all these things make sense. And look, like, if I'm trying to evaluate him as a domestic political leader, I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't. And maybe he's a genius. Maybe in 2 years I'll be here being like, I'm sorry, I didn't see the genius. But I see it. I'm like, this is messed up. I don't understand, like, politically how this is good for you, for the United States, for the Republicans. I don't get it.
Where I will defend him is that I think his gut usually leads him into the right decision in the long term because constraints move him into that move.
Mm-hmm.
But, so for example, USMCA is a great free trade deal. Like, he started off negotiations brashly with some idiotic ideas. None of that got implemented. The deal that got made was awesome. Like, Hillary Clinton would have loved to make a deal like that. Right? So Donald Trump got something done that, if you're a member of the CFR or if you're an economist at the IMF, you're like, wow, I like that. That was awesome. But he could have just gone to it maybe earlier had he just, like, as you said, read a strategy piece, or like, listen to so-called experts, quote unquote. And I shit on experts all the time, especially American learned elites. Like, yeah, sure, many of them are morons, but like some of this stuff is pretty normal. It's just pretty obvious. Like, you don't need to be like member of some elitist cabal to figure out how to get a deal with Mexico and Canada done. So what I would say to you is, like, I think one of the problems is that his penchant for kind of rediscovering sliced bread, right? So on one hand, I think people who criticize him, who do have Trump derangement syndrome, just hate him. And then when he does something, good, they attack it. For example, I think it's absolutely insane that you've got a bunch of liberals who would not have wanted to attack Iran now saying, "Well, you didn't finish the job." It's like, bro, what do you want? Do you want him to go into a forever war and find more uranium to bomb? Like, what are you talking about? Relax. That was perfectly well executed attack on nuclear facilities, and it's sufficient. Shut up. So on one hand, there's that criticism that everything he does is wrong. But on the other hand, the criticism is really that the end point, the concluded negotiations, the USMCA, the phase one, these trade deals we're going to get, like, did it really require the whole entire, like, volatility of policy just so that you, Mr. President, can figure out that what was obvious on day one is obvious on day 300, right? So that's where I would say that some of that volatility is just unnecessary. And that's where the domestic politics gets really messy. The other issue is immigration. I mean, like, we did a whole episode, Jacob, on immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And my conclusion on that was like, look, let's be very clear. Fans of Donald Trump have to explain why was it that he scuttled an immigration deal the Republicans and the Joe Biden administration painstakingly produced. He comes in, says, please don't pass this deal to his Republican friends so that he can use it as an election, issue. This happened in early 2024. Look it up. Donald Trump, right, says to senators, Republican senators, don't pass this bill. And then now we've got the situation where he is the president. He's got full control of Congress. Okay, fine. You know what? You wanted to win the election. I can abide by that. God bless you. You delayed immigration reform by 18 months. Who cares? Well done. But now that you are a president, like, you have control of Congress, why not pass your own immigration reform? Why not do it? You know what? You can't find 8 Democratic senators. Just, I don't know, pay them with some pork or basically give them some work visa programs for their state. I don't know. But it seems really interesting. Like, that seems like an own goal. Instead, there's this added pressure domestically, like talking about arresting the mayor of a city because they're doing this or that. There's street battles between ICE and so on. Like, although that's obviously overstated by the media, but that's a good example of that domestic policy that is unnecessarily aggressive and circumspect.
Yeah, and just to say, like, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I know I got a little hot there, but I am saying, like, I do think he probably belongs at the bottom edge of my list. So he probably belongs, like, in the low 30s, or maybe he should have even cracked my list. And he has done things, like, I'm not one of these people who can't notice when he does things that are good. Like, Operation Warp Speed was absolutely incredible. I don't think he gets near enough credit for what he did with Operation Warp Speed.
He gets no credit.
He gets no credit for it.
No credit.
In the one big beautiful bill, this idea that you're going to give $1,000 to every kid that is born between now and 2028 to have a nest egg so that they have, that's provided by the federal government. Sounds great. We should have been doing this a long time ago. That's something the Dems have been talking about for years, and he's the one that actually got it done. Like, cool. There's some stuff in this bill that I'm like, right on. But it's,
yeah, but come on,
like
come on. We all know $800 of that 1,000 is going in, like, his crypto plays, though, right? So, like, come on.
Well, that goes back to my other point, but I'm just saying, like, he has these like things that make you, but then when you put together the sum total, I think you're exactly right. Like, could you have gotten the USMCA with all this nonsense? Could you have gotten better trade deals without ruining the relationship with Japan and South Korea, which he's in the middle of doing? Like, I think one of the only real foreign policy successes of the Biden administration was really strengthening the trilateral between Japan, South Korea, the United States. That's gone now. He's just, like, jettisoned them and turned Japan and South Korea, along with the Europeans, against the United States for generations to come because of how he's treating it. Was that really necessary? Like, I don't know.
Look, what I would say about this is, it's what I feared the most is that there are about 5 things that President Trump has done that are maybe like top 20 things that any president has done in the last 150 years. Like, that's how transformative he can be on occasion. And foreign policy is one of them. But I fear that because of the divisiveness and the rhetoric, the next president of the United States of America who's a Democrat will abandon those, even if they're good for America, just purely out of Trump derangement syndrome. And you saw that with the Biden administration as well. They kept some things like, the China focus. But But on the other fronts, they categorically abandoned many of the things that Trump did that were not completely insane or that were actually very good. Just like Trump abandoned things that Obama did just because they were Obama's, you know? And that's petty, but that's what happens when you're divisive and when you induce derangement syndrome in people. And you can blame liberals for having Trump derangement syndrome if you're conservative. Fine. But it's also being induced by almost like this mean trolling. And that's, you know, I think Trump defenders would say, well, you need to have a character like that to be truly revolutionary. You know, and I'm not sure that's the case. I think there's leaders on our list who are revolutionary and they're not divisive.
Yeah.
And they're in the
It
top
was
5. And they're in the top 5 of our list, by the way. And
yeah.
that's why
It
they're
was
there.
it was Shelby Foote who said the great American art is compromise, and there's none of that in him. I guess the last thought I'll just say here, and this goes back to my questions about the one big beautiful bill and specifically the Medicaid cuts and things like that. Like I wonder when we're looking back if sometimes I compare Trump to, is he Huey Long, is he LBJ? But recently I've been thinking maybe he's Coolidge or Hoover. Like maybe he's just late stage in an economic cycle governing a country where inequality is increasing, and he's sort of doing the things that the wealthy class wants and things like that. But like when you start cutting Medicaid by this much and you start cutting these entitlement benefits by this much, even if people think that they want that, once they start experiencing that, they're probably going to turn on the system, and they're probably going to say, okay, well, the system is not working for me anymore. And I think you see this in that Steve Bannon and AOC are basically both saying you need to raise taxes. So the fringes of both parties are starting to say, hey guys, the party is up, let's go. There's Elon Musk out there with the third party as well. So I mean, we talked about legacy for some of these leaders. I think that's another problem for Trump. Now maybe I'm wrong about the impact of some of the things that he's pushing through, but some of the things that he's pushed through domestically, to me, seem like unforced errors, and seem to me like they're going to set up both the Republican Party and his legacy for not having historians treat them so kindly. But maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, I don't know. That's
I mean, it would be very fitting if Donald Trump brought us AOC in 2028. So there you go.
well, I don't think he's going to do that. But
all right. Well, listen, this is over 2 hours now. I think that we should definitely put a stop
we should
on
stop.
this.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, that's
Oh,
the
wait.
2025.
We have to answer one more question, Marco, because I said I think Trump probably belongs in my low 30s or maybe even top 20s. Do you have him anywhere close? Like, where was he on your list before you close it out?
Yeah, I think he's top 50.
Top 50.
I mean, he's not. He's like, again, like anyone who complains about their favorite leader being 35th. Remember, there's like 190 plus countries in the world. So yeah, I don't think he's in the second half of countries on the planet. So yeah, he belongs probably somewhere in the top 50.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Okay, cool. That's it.
And
Thank you. And
any
we're
last-
gonna do this every year. Yes. Last word I'm gonna say is we should do this every year. We should publish this as a joint list. The top 44 leaders. Well, we'll call it top 30, and we'll see how many make it. But this is our 2025 edition. So Mexico, you won. Well done. Italy, you came in second place. Well done as well. And yeah, like 12 months from now, we'll see where we are, and we'll see which were our biggest misses. So that, I think, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right. Cheers, dude.